And hi, and welcome to Gay Out the City. I'm your host, Prince Electro Diamond, and today I am here with adult content creator and entertainer Danny Duran. How you doing today, sexy?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am good. I am good. Living life. I want to say it's almost the weekend. You know what? I'm gonna go with that narrative. It's almost the weekend.
I feel like we're more than halfway through the week, right? It's
Yeah,
as of recording, it's end of day Wednesday, so
right.
I think we only got 2 days left for those who work a
Yeah,
normal weekday schedule.
I love working a Monday through Friday. In fact, I couldn't do unless I was like working nightlife. I couldn't do anything on Monday through Friday. People are like, I love working Saturday. No, you know,
It's kind of mixed because I had jobs before where I had to work, one or both weekend days. There's something kind of nice about having a weekday off if you got like a full time job because you're off when most people aren't, right? So you're out there kind of doing stuff, chilling, and you feel like this almost sense of like I get something that other people don't because I'm here chilling at the park or doing whatever on like a Wednesday.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's good. Let's see. I guess that's good. Like if you wanna just chill, but they're just chill during the week, as you said. But there is something about being able to go out on like a Friday night to a bar and know for the fact that you don't have to wake up the next morning if you don't want to. You can be out as late as you want. Get a hotel for the weekend. Like,
Okay, that's fair. That's
yeah,
fair. I'll also have to say, like, when I had a job where I worked, like a full time job where I worked not a Monday through Friday, I started at like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. So it was in a call center, right? So I could still
well,
go out on Friday night because I could, as long as I'm up by like noon.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like I work for, well, I work phones for a company now, but it's like all of those shifts have either been like either 7 to 3:30, 8 to 4:30, like 9 to 5:30, stuff like that. So I've never had that. I've had people who did those like 1 o'clock shifts, and most of them
Okay.
hated it because they wanted to be like, they're like, it sucks. This ruins my whole day. I'm like, yeah. Why do you think I want to work mornings? Like,
Yeah, it's a trade-off, I guess. I didn't mind it honestly because I've never been a natural like morning person, and it was kind of cool to like work until whatever 10 o'clock, and then I'd go out sometimes after work. This is like a long time ago. I was like 20 years old,
yeah,
and I would go out, get off work at 10, go out at 10:30 or 11, and then stay out until whatever time.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the last part, I guess we can just get into. So, where are you originally from?
I'm originally from not that far from where you live now. Actually, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, word.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's been a while since I lived there, but born and raised Cleveland, Ohio, and moved away from there in geez, like 20 years ago.
See, you and I kind of did the opposite. You went south, I went north. So I'm originally from Florida, and I moved up here
Yeah, yeah,
because it's just like this is what I say to people. Florida's not affordable for like anybody now, especially if you want to live like right now. I have a 1 bedroom apartment. I could never afford to do that by myself in Florida anywhere. Like,
yeah. I've heard that Florida prices have just gone up so much in the past few years, and it's really like you said, it's tough for a lot of people that are not as far along, career wise or financially or whatever the situation to like, even get by on their own unless they live with like three roommates.
yeah, and it's like I wouldn't mind. Well, actually, would I want to live with somebody? Like, I guess maybe not long term. Like, I don't mind if people have like crashing with me for a little bit, but like in terms of long term, unless we're dating, I feel like that gets weird. Like
Yeah,
having roommates.
I've had roommates before, and I don't know if it's so much weird. It gets annoying. It definitely gets annoying because it's pretty rare that you don't have a situation where at some point one person is gonna sort of do something to piss off one or more of the other people.
Right.
Either it's like something related to chores or noise or whatever it might be. So it's like less that it gets weird and more that it just gets to the point where you just get so annoyed that you like want out. That's been my experience when I've done it in the past.
Yeah. So what was it like for you growing up as a kid in Ohio?
Yeah, so it was very chaotic, I would say. I grew up in an urban environment, and Ohio is an interesting state because it's like depending on where you are in the state, it can feel very like southern almost. Like if you're down kind of near the border of West Virginia, it can feel very midwestern if you're like kind of going towards Indiana, or it can feel very like Rust Belt, almost East Coast kind of vibe if you're like in the towards the Pennsylvania border, which is where I grew up in Cleveland, and it was like a very scrappy time. It felt like, and I kind of bounced around a lot. Like my parents got divorced when I was a kid, and I lived at different times with like different relatives and things like that. So it was chaotic, but definitely like formative, I guess, because I look back now and it's like that's kind of all that bouncing around type of stuff made me who I am now. So in hindsight, I guess it's the nostalgia lens, but in hindsight, it's kind of cool to like think back about my story.
Right. I will say, as someone who not that long ago lived in my hometown, not necessarily fun. Growing up in a city, that's one thing I'm always envious of is people who got to grow up in a city. Because I grew up in like a suburb, 45 minutes to an hour outside of West Palm Beach. So like I probably would have had a very different life had I been near the city. I probably would have started drag earlier. I probably would have gotten into trouble, like just sneaking into bars and stuff. I probably would have because it's like especially in small suburb Florida, there's not a whole lot to do. Like when people say, "Oh, South Florida, you got Miami, you've got all this." I'm like, Miami's 2 hours away. So it's like I don't know about most people, but like even when I was living at home, Miami used to be like a weekend thing, and by weekend I mean you get a hotel because
Yeah.
driving back and forth, I've done it before. It's a pain in the ass, but I've done it before.
Yeah, it's not the kind of thing like you're not going to just hop out to the bar on a random Thursday night
No way.
and go see a show or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I remember Cleveland obviously is not as major of a city as like the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach sort of ongoing area, but being in an urban area, I remember that there were these like suburban kids that would come in and they would like drive from 45 minutes away to go to these bars. And I occasionally would hang out. And I remember going out to these like far out subdivisions where all that's around is like shopping centers, that every shopping center has the same stuff. It seems like there's a Kohl's and a Target and a supermarket and like,
Yeah.
and like the Walgreens and all this. And it's just like suburban housing developments. And it just felt so bland. And, I'm glad I didn't grow up in an environment like that, honestly, because I feel like I at least had some stuff around, and I like literally even before I drove, I would get on the bus and like go
Yeah.
downtown.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
it is so. I mean, when I finally did move away, I lived in Orlando for 4 years, which was like
Okay.
my escape out when,
Second home.
well, yeah, people were like, but why did you, or when people said, like, what was it? I remember having a conversation with my aunt once. She's like, I thought you were never going to leave here. I'm like, but I had to. Like, I really had to. Like, I had to go find myself. Like, I
For
wasn't going to
sure.
find myself at home.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Unless you're in, like, New York City, which is, that's one of those things where I say, when I leave Michigan, that's probably where I'm going to end up is New York City.
New York City, or I will say LA, as long as you're like in LA, you're not out in like Riverside or something, or San Francisco Bay Area. As long as you can kind of be in one of these like huge metro areas where you can get to stuff pretty easily, it's like maybe worth it to never leave.
Right. LA. I've said my piece on here about LA. My thing is I can't move to LA because I have a mouth, and I'm not. I feel like a lot of LA is like people telling people who are like so untalented, "Oh my God, babe, you did amazing," because they could give you a connection.
Yeah.
Whereas I'd be the bitch like I'd be like, "Who the fuck told you should go on stage?" Like legit. Like, do you have no friends?
Yeah. No, LA is all about playing the game, I think.
Yeah.
It's not about being straightforward.
And it's all about, at least in my view, it's all about Hollywood glamour. And it's like, I'd rather be an artist. Like,
yeah,
I'm a musician. I make like electronic music. I make like electronic pop rock. It's like, I don't necessarily fit in that mold of being quote unquote pretty, like always like extremely pretty. I like being edgy, and I feel like that's better in New York than it is in LA.
For sure. Yeah. Like I think the Rust Belt, kind of like Detroit, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Buffalo, like that area, or New York is where that like edgy is appreciated and like actually has some like staying power. And I think that New York's actually kind of losing it over time. New York is becoming a little bit more like sterile. That's been my observation over the years. It's never going to be completely sterile, but it's not the gritty New York that it was maybe 20 years ago.
No, that part I absolutely agree with. I think it was when I watched the Lady Bunny documentary of Woodstock, and she used to talk about how like, what is it? I remember her saying like 1-bedroom apartments for like $800. I'm like, what? Like in New York? Like,
oh yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's I don't want to get a super off track, but if you look back at like way back, like the 80s and 90s, they were practically like giving real estate away because New York was so bad. It was so dysfunctional. It was so like it was such a fucked up mess that you could like buy an apartment for like $25,000, and like rent was super cheap. People were renting apartments for like $400, $500, $600 a month. Again, this is decades back now, but like, this was the era where New York was, and people thought like, oh, New York's never going to recover. New York's always and then sure enough, over a few decades, it's certainly more than recovered at this point. But I remember like seeing old, like I don't remember when it actually happened, but I remember seeing like ads for like apartments being literally auctioned off in like 1991 for like $12,000, $17,000 for like an actual co-op or condo type apartment. And obviously those are not that price anymore.
No way. It's just I would say to be in New York in that time would have been great because you had, especially I would say like from the 70s on would be great because like the 70s you started having the Studio 54, and then in the 80s and like the early 90s you had the Club Kid era, and that was all sort of I do love that time, and I do love the sort of creativity and not caring. And like one of my favorite movies to watch for the audience out there, if you've never seen it, it's a movie called Party Monsters with Macaulay Culkin and Seth Green. It's like it just shows how it was. Yeah, it was really good. It came out I think in like 2005, and it's just and it very much shows the club kid lifestyle. It shows the like club kids getting on Geraldo and like all that stuff.
Yeah. But I think you're spot on around like anything in the 70s or after, because it's like that's when that sort of post Stonewall is when that opened up a whole new possibility of like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna be out and loud and proud, whether it was sort of like LGBT or not. It was like it ushered in like more of a fuck you movement. And I think that took shape in a lot of forms, like you said, the club kid stuff and and other things over the next couple of decades after that.
Right. And that's how it should be. Even I feel like one of the things is even with drag, when people say like drag queens do this, and this was the thing, RuPaul's Drag Race. I know we're gonna get back to the questions. Believe me, I run. Yes. You run. You said you don't want to run on off topic. This is what this whole podcast is. Like, especially when I get with somebody I vibe with, it's very good. But it's that sort of notion of just doing things differently. And RuPaul's Drag Race had that for a little bit. Like when you had Adore Delano come out, and Adore Delano was like, "Wow, she's probably one of my like drag musical inspirations because she was just doing stuff." And she dared to think, oh, you don't have to be funny to make music, which I honestly believe you shouldn't have to be. If you want to make heartfelt music, you should just make heartfelt music. And that's what I say. Fingers crossed. I'm saving up my money. Hopefully, once we get past winter, I'll be getting in the studio soon and finally recording because I have an album written. I just have to get in and record it.
Okay. Yeah, I know that you talked about that. I've heard in other podcasts about getting you to, record when you can.
Yeah, definitely.
That'll be sweet.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. So, what was it like for you coming out?
Yeah, I didn't really have any like particular moment of coming out. It was I didn't even really realize that I was gay, I think, until I was maybe 17, 18, 19, kind of right around the end of high school, maybe early adulthood. And it wasn't like some grand moment of like, oh yeah, I'm coming out or, whatever. It was like, it was kind of like dabbling and trying things out. And like, I don't have any kind of like amazing coming out story. It was kind of like my friends kind of either knew or like, I guess there were like, little things here and there. Like I maybe told some friend of mine, like, oh, like I think this guy's hot or whatever. And then, those kinds of things. But there was never any like big coming out story. There was never any kind of drama around it. Nobody ever like disowned. And I realize a lot of people aren't this fortunate, but like nobody ever like disowned me, and nobody ever was like, oh, don't you ever set foot in this town again. Or there was, I'm very fortunate that there was never anything like that happened. And I never really I never like made some grand announcement. So it's like, there probably are people that I went to high school with that like maybe don't even know, or people that there are probably people that don't know, because I never really like had this grand like, oh, I'm gay kind of moment. And I don't know, my mom kind of figured it out. I think she figured it out as I was figuring it out, to be honest with you, when I was like 19 years old. And at the time, she actually lived in the like apartment below me. It was like a 2-story house with like a first floor unit and a second floor unit, and she lived below me. And I'm kind of like experimenting, hooking up with guys when I'm like 19. So I think she kind of like figured it out at that point. And as I'm figuring it out, right? So it's like, there's no real exciting story to tell around coming out. It was kind of just this like gradual thing where I kind of figured it out along with everybody else figuring it out about me.
I feel like that's also somewhat of a city influence, because I feel like the whole big coming out stories come from people who live in smaller towns, or as I say, like with my unfortunate story, is you have religious people trying to convert you. That was at one point. Let me put it this way: I had a youth minister who first, when I came out, tried to lock me in a behavioral clinic and thought that was going to do something. But it's like when that didn't work, he set me up with a therapist who tried to pray the gay away.
Yeah, that to me seems like more of a Southern thing too, right? So
absolutely.
It's like having grown up in Florida, which it's technically the South, I guess, but it doesn't feel like it as much anymore, just because so many people have moved to California and Texas. I mean, I'm not sorry. So many people have moved to Florida and Texas from California and New Jersey and everywhere else over the past decade or so. but I think that when we were kids, it was, you probably had more of that like Southern, almost fundamentalist influence going on, right?
It's honestly, it's because I honestly only believe it's because I was raised Catholic, because it's I grew up in kind of, I wouldn't say southern, but I would definitely say slightly wealthier area.
Okay.
Obviously, like when you live near West Palm Beach, most of what you get until you get like closer to Melbourne is pretty rich. Like
Okay.
even like middle class people still have like a decent sized yard and a decent sized house and
A
that
fancy
kind of thing. Yeah.
BMW in the driveway, or probably multiple BMWs in the driveway, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up Catholic too, actually. I mean, my family, the whole, all my background and influence is a mix of like Italian and Eastern European and Hispanic. And it's like, but it's all Catholic. Everything's Catholic.
Right.
But I think it's that urban thing is probably the key, that like, I don't know. I just felt like there was never really any kind of big obstacle that I faced on that front, at least.
Well, it's because at the end of the day, I almost say with people, there's also a way that's different about people who have kids. I would particularly say in New York City, who have kids that live in a city versus kids that aren't. Where like if you're in a smaller town, it's like, oh, you can't swear in front of my kids. Meanwhile, if you do that in Manhattan, it's like they
What the
probably
fuck's wrong with you? Yeah.
yeah, they probably hear like motherfucker every time they like go into a subway. Like it's gonna happen. You're in a city.
For sure. For sure. And I think that it's like Cleveland in particular is like a very, or at least it was once upon a time, in Detroit similarly, like an edgy kind of place where it's like you'll have some fancy looking white lady in a Volvo SUV like get in a fist fight in like a Chase Bank parking lot. You'll have that kind of, and I think that's an environment that's not going to be as much of a like clutch the pearls kind of environment.
No, and that's honestly why I remember when I moved in to my place. So I'm leasing from like a property manager, and this place was cheaper. I lived like 20 minutes, 25 minutes outside of the city. So like
Okay.
I'm close enough, but like not in downtown. But they were even telling me, they're like, you can live in this place. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's $200 more a month, and I'm in the middle of nowhere. Like, honestly, I'd rather be 20 minutes outside the city than in the sticks. Because then I'm like, I remember when I like first moved here, I was starting door dashing before I finally got a job, and it was like,
Yeah.
it is like I would sometimes work like midnight to like 6, and I'm like, I'm gonna get murdered out here. Like, I'm like, yeah, it's just it's not for me. It's like some people love that sort of small town feel. No, I left small town for a reason.
Yeah.
That's honestly why when I moved to Orlando, people. So I lived like right in the heart of downtown in Orlando. People like,
Okay.
why would you live there? I'm like, because I can afford to. Like, that's why. That's, man. Pre-pandemic, let me tell you, pre-pandemic Orlando, I was living in and by the way, you can never get this in Florida now. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment for $750 a month.
Nice.
Yeah, like no.
Probably
those
twice
days
that
are
now,
long
right?
up. Oh yeah, I looked up the price, just curious because I wanted to look. Last time I looked, they were charging $900. They're probably charging $1,000 for it now. And this place was a piece of shit. I'm like,
I'm surprised it's not more than that. I'm surprised it's not more than that, because I mean, at so many of these places now, $1,200, $1,500 for like basic 1-bedroom apartments. I see these advertisements, and I'm like you said, who can afford these things unless you have, and again, unless you're further along financially, which plenty of people are, and you'll be there, especially once your music takes off, right?
Yeah,
it's like there's people who are earlier and they're not at that point yet. How can people afford to even live in these places? Like, the big cities in Florida.
It's not only that. Even when I remember they tried to like justify raising my price, and I think they wanted me to pay $850 when I finally like moved out. I'm like, I'm not paying eight. Especially you said that like 1,500. It's like I'm not paying $1,500 because I was living in the hood. I'm like, I'm not paying $1,500 to live in the hood. That's insane.
Yeah.
Like, like you cannot just like, I don't care what you say. That's not justifiable. It's like when I can go 3 streets over and you've got a crime rate there that's like very, very high. No, like, no, it's not worth it.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. It's crazy to just see how much some of the asking rents are for some of these places.
So, okay. Well, I'm guessing I'm going to ask you. So, I mean, I looked in Texas a little bit, but what is it kind of like in Texas in terms of?
So people are really nice. I will say that everybody's really like they're really really nice, and it's not the like Bible thumping environment that people sometimes make it out to be. But again, I'm in a more of an urban slash suburban environment. I think that if you were to go to like a legit small town, you probably will get more of that. Like people, the clutch the pearls. Like I can't possibly engage with somebody who's gay or whatever it might be. But I'm basically between Austin and San Antonio, and that whole stretch between Austin and San Antonio now is pretty much built up as like suburbia, and I'm just in a subdivision house about halfway between the two. And I like how nice people are. I like how affordable it is here. I lived in, I don't think I didn't share this before, but I lived in California for a really long time.
Wow.
So I lived, I grew up in Cleveland, but I lived in California. I lived in New York. I lived in, a couple of different places. And I lived the longest in California. I lived like the majority of my adult life was in California until I moved to Texas. And, California just has gotten to the point where it's so unaffordable. I mean, you think Florida is unaffordable.
No, I know.
It's just like, that's why people are moving from California to Florida, because it's like Florida is cheap compared to California. So it's like, even if you're housing, even if your grandfather didn't do a good housing, setup, everything else is expensive too. Like gas for your car, tolls. Like I literally had to cross a bridge. I had to drive to work. There wasn't like where I worked, there wasn't a train or anything like that. So I had to drive. It was like, I think it was like $7 at the end.
Wow.
I think originally it was like, when I first started that job, it might've been like $3 or $4, but like it kept going up. And like every year it would go up by like $1 or $2. And it was like, I think $7, maybe even $8 just across the bridge, right? And that's plus you're paying for gas, plus insurance is expensive. Everything is crazy expensive. So it was like, I looked at that and I'm like, okay, well, Texas, everything is like going to be a lot more affordable. I was kind of over just some of the like quality of life issues that were starting to happen in California. Like I got, it's never happened the whole time I lived there. But then like towards the end of living there, this like crazy guy like spat in my face one time, and like it was just like out of control. So I was like, okay, I got to get out of here. And people here are just generally nicer. I think I like that it's not an echo chamber too, right? It's like you have a mix of people who are on the left and people who are on the right here. Again, I know if you go to a small town in Texas, it's probably going to be like the far extreme right. But when you're in a bigger city like San Antonio or Austin, you got to have a healthy mix, which actually sparks debate and discussion, as opposed to like, I only am going to hear or see the things that align with my point of view. So I like that. I personally don't like want to just live in an echo chamber. Like even if somebody disagrees with me, I want to hear them out. I want to understand what's their stance on something. And here you can have that. Whereas in California, it was just like not happening. Like everybody agreed with pretty much the left platform, and that was it. And again, this is like, I'm not advocating for like the right platform, but I want to like hear. It's like, oh, well, why do you think that? And like, let's have a discussion, and you can actually have that here, which I appreciate.
And it's also the fact that I would say until 2016, there was a time where you could have that open discussion and it all makes sense, and you'd be able to find some sort of like oh, you want this, I want this. Now
Yeah,
it's so polarized because of the fact that you have the problem is this is on both sides. It's
it
you have
is
a
both sides. Yeah,
it's you have a division on the right and the left because you have, especially you have on the right, you have the people who love Trump, the people who voted for Trump because they didn't have a decision. You have the corporatist Democrats on the left, and then you have progressives, and it's like it's so they're so divided. Everyone's like, we all have to fight against this person. I'm like, how can we fight against this person when we can't even fight? We can't even like agree on each other.
for sure, for
Yeah,
sure. I think, yeah, no, that's spot on, and I do think you're right. 2016 is about the past, like 10 years or so that it's gotten like
yeah,
really, really divisive in this country in terms of politics, and I think that like the people who sort of worship Trump, you can't really have a debate with them. So it's like, but I'm talking about more like the people who are kind of more, how do you put this? Like the people who have more conservative, a conservative approach, and they're voting for Trump because he happens to be the Republican, not the people who are
right.
like praying to Trump, right? Because there are people out there who like literally just like Trump is their god, and I'm like, well, that's and, like those are the people you can't really have much of a debate with. But
No, absolutely.
you have, yeah, I think you have, like you said, the left has also gotten kind of like crazy too. It's like both sides have their like the crazy camp, and I it's like it's a little unsettling where people are not really ever meeting in the middle. And I'm not saying you need to change your views to meet in the middle, but like at least meet in the middle to have a discussion, like a respectful discussion, and that's happening less and less and less these days, especially in places that are like either super far left or probably I'd imagine super far right, like a small town in Texas.
Yes, because it's the fact that, and even with some of the left, it's the the worst part is you have in the progressive camp, even just on the left, you have the progressives, but then you have even the progressives who are like, you try and sit there, and then they go too far, and then it's like all of a sudden it's like, wait, you're sitting here fighting for this?
Yeah.
Now we're heading sitting here fighting for that. I mean, we're gonna dive deep into this question later, but it's one of the biggest things that I remember people talking about is like trans people in sports. Don't get me wrong, I support the trans community, but running politically on that, that's not a winning strategy.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, totally, totally. It's
not
like, let's talk about the things that impact, like, and again, I don't want to like say that like somebody's sports career is not important, but like
right.
let's look at like the dynamic of the economy, and let's look at something that's
Exactly.
impacting maybe thousands or maybe millions of people's like livelihood and their ability to like eat and have
Yeah,
health care and things like that. It's like that matters like a lot. And I'm not saying that like somebody's ability to play sports and advance their
absolutely.
sports career doesn't matter, but it's like, okay, this thing impacts like a very, very, very small percentage of the population. Again, not saying it's not important, but like you can't just ignore this economic factor, the economy thing, or like things related to healthcare and stuff like that affect like maybe the majority of the population.
Right. It's almost where, and this is where some people, this is where I gotta say, as much as like I didn't love Kamala Harris, she did get kind of a raw deal in the fact that she didn't get to run a real presidential term. I think she maybe got to run for 4 months,
Yeah,
maybe five. It's like that's not a presidential run. How are you supposed to make any sort of platform when you're just trying to figure out? Obviously, you stand for some stuff, but how are you supposed to
yeah.
navigate anything
Oh, I know.
when
They did her dirty by not doing a real primary. I mean,
right,
it's like, again, I voted for Joe Biden. I voted for Joe Biden in 2020.
right?
I,
That's what
I
we
was
all did.
supportive, but again, I'm not a Biden detractor. But about 2 years in, you could tell that this guy is kind of like past his prime is an understatement. You could tell that like some of the things he would say in interviews, and you're just like, oh my god, like so it's like it became pretty apparent that he wasn't necessarily the best fit for running for a second term. But
Right.
I'd say like 2022, maybe 2023. but then they decided to run him anyways. And it's like,
right.
And they did a disservice to everybody. They did a disservice to democracy. They did a disservice to Kamala Harris. They did a disservice to the whole fucking country by doing this backdoor route to like not do a proper primary and run him, and then all of a sudden say, oh, guess what? It's just going to be Kamala. That to me was a circumventing of the democratic process and a huge disservice to her. I don't know. I felt like it was a little bit of a hypocritical move, given how the Democratic Party has consistently used the line, hey, we're all about democracy, whereas the GOP is not. It's like, oh, I believed that up until that point. It's when they pulled that where I was like, this is the pot calling the kettle black.
See, I didn't. Well, obviously, I voted for Joe Biden, but it's like I kind of knew. As I said, I kind of knew in 2016 where there were people saying, like, polls where they had Bernie Sanders significantly beating Donald Trump, and yet they ran Hillary Clinton anyway. So it's like, clearly you don't care, because if you wanted somebody who's actually going to win, and that's the thing now where people say, are we ever going to get it's like, are we ever going to get the revolution? And my thought is, no. Well, we might, but it's going to take a while, because Bernie Sanders, everyone's like, but how do we know he's going to actually do what he says? I'm thinking because he has a track record starting in the 80s, basically saying the same thing that he has now up to 2016.
Yeah, I agree that he would do what he said. I don't think he would ever make it into office, because I don't think that the political parties, I think the political parties are more afraid of a very outlandish candidate winning than they are of the other party winning.
Absolutely.
So I think that, like, because if you pull away everything, corporate interests control the vast majority of what matters in this country.
Absolutely.
And whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in office, corporate interests control, like, lobbying. Look at how many, I don't know how many millions and millions and millions of dollars are spent on lobbying, like, month after month after month for every industry, whether it's the food and drug industry, pharmaceuticals, resources, oil, gas, transportation. Like, every industry is basically just shoveling money, whining and dining. They're controlling everything.
Right.
And a candidate like Bernie Sanders, a candidate like Kennedy, that's what scares these parties. That's what scares these parties. And they're like, oh shit, we can't have that. I think the Democratic Party would rather have Trump win than even take a chance at somebody like RFK Jr.
Or Mary. Well, I don't think RFK Jr. would have won either. Or you even look at Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson,
yeah.
When you hear her speak, she's making sense. She would have never. She was one of the names, so she could have theoretically put Joe, if there was a primary. She probably could have beat Joe Biden.
Maybe.
But the establishment, you're right. The establishment probably would have tried to get someone to take her out. Absolutely.
Yeah, because the establishment the establishment is most likely happier with Trump than they would be with her, or with a Sanders, or with somebody who is going to really shake something up. For everything that Trump is doing, it's mostly just noise. It's not. There's not a whole lot of material shakeup going on, that I can tell. I don't know. We'll see.
Yes. So, what made you want to start doing adult content?
Yeah, so that's a funny question that people have asked me. Friends have asked me before too. And I have always had, I don't say always, but like as long as I've known what sex work of some sort is, I've had an interest in it since I was like literally like probably a middle school kid. And it was always something that fascinated me, because I'm like, from the time that you learn what sex is, or at least for me, it's like, oh, that's cool. Like, and then it's like knowing that there's a way to somehow monetize that. There's a way to somehow potentially get famous doing that. It was something that always appealed to me going back to literally, my parents were still married. I was probably 9 years old. And I remember thinking about this, and I'm like, not that anything was super strict in our household or growing up, but I'm like, this is probably something I shouldn't vocalize. Like, I knew enough, even at 9 years old. I'm like, yeah, let me not talk about this as this 9-year-old kid. But something I was always super interested in, and I remember then when I was in high school, those. I can't even remember what it's called, but those free, like kind of like the Village Voice in New York City, and like every city has one or a few of those little free alternative newspapers that gets
okay,
published.
got you. Yeah.
And I remember seeing like ads in there for like escort services and strip places and things like that. And I was like, yeah, as soon as I turn whatever age I had to be, whether it was 18 or 21, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start stripping or go dancing or whatever. And again, this is why I didn't even realize I was gay, right? I was so into this concept of like putting on a show and making money from sex, basically, that it's just been like ingrained in me that it's like a thing that is interesting to me and that I wanted to pursue for, like, again, going all the way back to the point where I was like a kid. And then, the whole thing where you can kind of make adult content kind of on your own. This is like a relatively new thing, right? I mean, so this is like OnlyFans really only took off in the past, I'd say 5-10 years, especially the past 5 years. So it's like, it really wasn't that accessible until pretty recently, like especially the past, the COVID era. So I'm like, okay, like let's try to make a real go of this. And here we are.
See, that's amazing. And this is what I have to tell people. Sometimes you have to take a chance on yourself and know that if you fail, it's fine. It's fine. You
100%.
learn and you move,
100%.
and you move on. That's honestly, I can say definitely not so much when I started music, because like music had always been in my life probably since I was like 5-6 years old. But when I definitely started this, especially when I started interviewing people, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna take a shot. I don't know anybody, but I'm like, maybe if some people see, and that's honestly how I was able to. Probably the craziest thing that I would say as an interviewer was the fact that I got to interview somebody who was just on TV literally as they got eliminated. I literally said, I'm like, hey, will you come on? And they said yes. And I'm like, and to me, it's like, wow. By the way, for anyone who thinks, oh, I'm going to start on Get the Lucky, you're not. You're not. I had my own sort of brashness, and you're probably going to get rejected a lot. That's what people don't understand about the entertainment industry is you get rejected a lot. And if you can't handle rejection, this is not for you.
Totally. But you're going to get rejected from 100% of the things that you never try for, right?
Exactly.
You're rejected by default for everything you never try for. So even if your rejection rate is 95%, 99% of what you do try for, that's a higher win rate than what you'd get if you never tried for anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And with this, I've gotten to meet some people that I could have never imagined meeting. Please, if you had told little me, oh, at some point you're going to do something where you're going to get a chance to interview people on TV, I'm going to be like, go fuck yourself. Like, that's not going to happen. And it's been like that, but it's fun. Like, and you probably know this as a content creator. When you no longer have fun at something, that's when you got to give it up.
For sure. Yeah, that's 100%. If it's not moving you in the direction that you want or having fun in the moment, it's not worth putting your time and effort into it anymore.
Right. Okay, so with this next question, I said some of the questions before, and I'm actually going to add one thing on this.
Yeah.
So, who's been your favorite person to collaborate with? And also on that, who would be your dream person to collaborate with?
A double of that.
Yeah.
So my favorite person to collaborate with. So most people don't know this. I actually did a little bit of actual studio porn years ago when I lived in California. I was like, I don't know how old it was, 20 or 20 something. Did a little bit of studio porn, and I did a scene with Connor Habib, and I think he's like a professor now. He's like in academia now, and that was probably my favorite collaboration. We had like really good energy and stayed in touch for a while afterwards. This was like 2009. This was a long time ago, and it was just so much fun. And I remember even the cameraman, who I can't remember who it was, but the cameraman / director was a lot of times these porn stars will eventually sort of become directors, and sort of as they're retiring from being in front of the camera, they get behind the camera and direct. And I remember like he had his dick out, and we're both like sucking his dick and stuff. And it was just like so much fun. It felt so unscripted. It felt so like authentic, and that has been my favorite. It was before the word like collab would have been used, right? But that was my favorite scene partner, I guess was the term that was used back then. But that was by far my favorite, just because of the energy. And I remember even after the scene was over in San Francisco, we walked around and like hung out, and we went to go get something to eat or get a drink, or I can't remember exactly what we did, but we hung out for a while. And yeah, it was a great time. And I would love to have more experiences like that here.
Right.
The second part of your question, I kind of got to think about it. There's a few that are on my list of sort of dream collabs. I think if I had to pick one, I'm gonna go with his handle is like a taste of Matt. It's Matt Ellis.
Okay, yeah.
Australian guy. And the reason why, and he's extremely hot, right? But so are so many guys are extremely hot. Like, you know, a handsome face, beautiful body, it's like hot ass, hot hole, you know, hot everything. There's plenty of guys that have that, but there's something about him, like there's this charisma. So when he makes reels and he talks about his own situation and having, like, you know, left his corporate job, and I have a corporate job too, so it's like I can relate. You know, I've always had a corporate job, or mostly had a corporate job. So it's like hearing his story and hearing his authenticity and like his cute little reels that he makes. I am pretty drawn to him, but he's pretty big time. I mean, he's one of these guys that probably has 500,000 followers, and he's probably one of these, like, you know, 7-figure earners on OnlyFans. So
right.
That's probably a pie in the sky kind of dream right now.
Yeah. I know people in the porn industry don't know him. Can't help either. No kidding. But it's like, ooh. Okay, so now let's see. Who's been? I'll say like dream collaboration for music, but I think who's been my favorite interview? Actually, it's someone. No, I'll say two. One of them's big time. One of them's like up and coming. So one of my favorites was Ricky Roman. I just love him. He's a sweetheart. And like, I love him. He's almost impossible to get a hold of, but when I do, it's nice to get him on here. Like,
yeah, he seems like a nice guy from everything I can pick up from social media.
Oh yeah, he definitely is. He's like crazy busy, and that's why, because he does multiple things. What was it? He literally did an off-Broadway play because he lives in New York now. So he did. Yeah, he lives in New York, and he did like an off-Broadway play, and then like as a dancer recently, he was just in like Thailand. So like, he's definitely like someone who's all around, and I love seeing him succeed. He's been here twice. Fingers crossed I can get him here for a third time. But yeah, he's amazing. And then the other one is my friend. His name is Twunk the Twink. He does memes. He does TikTok live streaming almost every day. He does OnlyFans. He does videos for TikTok. He's one of those people, much like me, who do like 8,000 things. Yeah. Which is what you have to do in the entertainment industry now.
For sure.
Anyone who thinks, oh, I can just do one thing, no.
No, well, or you're just not gonna get the momentum, which is like,
Yeah,
where you're gonna be really, really slow to grow and to advance, which is also okay, right? But you have to just have that realistic expectation, I think.
right. And in terms of dream collabs,
Yeah.
I'll answer this on both sets of who I'd want. Well, Matt Ellis is somebody I've reached out to, so I have no connection to him. So it'd be nice to get him here, and then, I don't know. Let's put it this way. I put out a lot of. I do, and this is one of the benefits from working from home. I'm doing emails, DMing, all this stuff, trying to schedule things together all the time. So I have a few that I'm talking with, and I will say they would be nice dreams and to be determined. That's
Yeah.
what I'm gonna say. But in terms of music, I would definitely say, without a doubt, she's one of my favorite artists. Love her, and that's Lady Gaga. Without,
Oh, nice.
yes, yeah,
Have you seen her cameo in the latest video with Sexy Red and
yes,
Bruno
yes, I
Mars?
did. Yeah, I did.
When I saw her show up in that, I was like, yes, because that is so not like that's the most amazing collab of the year. I think like the year is barely going, but like that collab is like quite something. But yeah, I love Lady Gaga, and that would be amazing. Let's put this is going to go on both of our vision boards. I'm putting Lady Gaga for you on my vision board,
Yes,
and we're gonna will that into being.
yes, I will definitely, and I'm gonna. I would say this: if I ever get in contact, if I ever get in contact with Matt Ellis, I'm all about sending people's way. Like that's
Yeah.
when people say, what was it? I remember somebody asked me, one of the guests I had on here is, I did an interview one time with Max Lord, and somebody's like, how did you get him? I'm like, I asked. Like, I asked, and he said yes. We just made a time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you just have to put it out there. It's like sales, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you just have to, it's a numbers game. You got to keep putting those asks out there. And the bigger you get, I mean, you've grown even quite a bit here just recently. The bigger
Right.
you get in terms of your following, in terms of your like star power, so to speak, the
Yeah.
more yeses you're going to get.
Yeah. And as I tell people, especially, so let's see, I started doing interviews in 2023. That year, I did stuff not necessarily only as an interviewer, but as a musician, because this is what I have to say to people. If you ever want to get in the position where I'm at, if you, especially if you do more than one thing, if you show that you're there for people, they will be there for you when you need them. They will definitely be there for you when they need them. And that was, I would say, at least in my view, no, more evidence. So I was in this competition for Rolling Stone, where that would have been like the
Oh,
chance. The
yeah.
prize was you would have won, like, I think it was like $5,000 and a chance to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. Well, spoiler alert, I didn't make it. But the fact that I made it almost to, I literally just got eliminated right before the semifinals, and
Oh,
I looked
wow.
at that and I'm like, I'm like, a year ago I would not have been able to do this. And I always tell people I'm so grateful for everyone who's done everything. You probably, so now that you've been in porn, I didn't know that before, obviously, interviewing you. So you probably worked with a lot of people.
I didn't do a ton, right? So
You did.
I did a little bit. I never really got super into it, and I would kind of like do a couple scenes. And at the time, I was juggling like work, and I went to back to school, and like I was always juggling things, and they weren't things that are all like aligned, right? So I'm like juggling different things that are like in these totally different buckets. So I never really got to, or I never really prioritized the adult entertainment stuff to the point where I was able to like make a huge go of it. And then it kind of sat on the back burner for years, right? It's only been really the past few years that I've kind of like dusted off the goods and tried to get back into things.
Well, yeah, I can understand that. I mean, that probably, if any time to go into the adult entertainment industry, that would have been the time, because at least from what I know now, I know a few people who have just, they did OnlyFans and then all of a sudden they just got in and got signed by Sean Cody. And it's like, back when you were talking about, that would have been the time to go in, because now I know exactly why everyone's going in. It's the one thing that I tell people is, if you want to go in the adult entertainment industry, the secret is you go in, make your name known, and then whenever you get the chance, you get the fuck out, and then you start doing OnlyFans. And not everyone, but a lot of people will follow you.
Oh yeah, you'll from day one of opening your OnlyFans, from opening your social media presence, from literally day one, you already have a fan base. You already like you can kind of write your own check, as opposed to somebody starting more grassroots and then maybe eventually doing some studio porn. The studio porn doesn't like pay a lot of money. It's kind of almost like once you make a name for yourself, the scrappy grassroots kind of way, unless you just want like that much more sort of recognition, or maybe which there's guys who want to do that. They want to like, oh, I want to win a Grabby's award, and these kinds of things. Then yeah, maybe doing some of the studio stuff makes sense. But there's plenty of guys who have never done a studio thing and never intend to do a studio thing because they built this grassroots thing from OnlyFans, and they're just happy with that.
No, I mean, honestly, first of all, I will tell people the fact that you can get, if your goal is to do like OnlyFans and get in and get like a GayVN, or get nominated for a GayVN.
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily do studio porn.
Yeah, that's true.
Not
so much these days. Yeah.
Because I've known people who've done OnlyFans and have only done OnlyFans and they're nominated. So it's like,
no, that's fair.
You just have to be the right person that everyone's looking for, and you'll eventually, I'd love to say everyone gets their dreams. Sometimes you have to create your own lane, and sometimes you have to settle eventually at some point for just doing like one independent project, or like doing OnlyFans, and like OnlyFans is all you're going to be able to do. And that should be fine, because at least you're getting your outlet. And
yeah, no, I agree with that. It's like, not everybody's going to reach the same level of success, but it's also possible to like adjust what your goal is as you go. And it's like, I don't know. I think that like, don't take it so seriously. Like whatever happens, and enjoy the ride. Right.
Right. Well, okay. Now I guess I'm going to rephrase this question to that. So now that you're getting back into it, would your goal be to do professional porn or start an OnlyFans, or is it you're kind of fine doing what you're doing now, and that's?
Yeah, no. So my goal, and it actually does technically, I actually do technically have an OnlyFans, but I don't promote it because I don't have very much content on there, right? So for me to like be out there promoting my OnlyFans, I need to have a good bank of content. And because I kind of had this on the back burner for some time, I'm more recently like kind of getting back into it. Once I have a handful of collabs and consistent content out there, that's when I'm going to be promoting it. So probably, over the course of 2025, I'm going to be building up that bank of content. And once I've got that bank of content, you better believe you're going to be seeing that in your Twitter feed, that like, hey, check this out. This such and such, here's a clip, the infamous 20-second clips, here's this clip, see the whole 19-minute video on OnlyFans, right? So those promos will be coming in. And technically I do have an OnlyFans. It's just like, you're not going to find a whole lot on there. You're a little bit on there. You're not going to find a whole lot on there. So I don't want to like sell I don't have a good metaphor, but I don't want to like pitch to try to get a bunch of subscribers when there's just not that much content on there. So 2025 is more of a focus for me on building up a bank of content. So doing collabs and and even some solo content and things like that. But also juggling my day job and other stuff that I'm involved in. So it's not going to be it's not my full-time thing. It's probably never going to be my full-time thing, and I don't want it to be really necessarily, because I've got a wide range of interests. But I do want to like make a go of it to the point where it's like I at least become on some people's radar, and at least hopefully share my my content with some folks who are interested, some guys who are interested, and make some money from it.
Right. So now to answer this question, would I want to be in the mainstream music industry? Or actually, a better way to put this is signed to a record label. And
Yeah.
my answer with that, honestly, is you'd have to offer me a lot. And it's because of the fact that I sing, I write, I make my own beats. So the fact that I own all my masters and you're going to come in and take my masters, you got to give me something to where it's like, oh yeah, I want to sign this. And some people think it's all about money. It's like, at least for me, it's about control, because I've seen so many stories. Well, not so many stories, but I've seen a decent amount of stories where you see people. One of the greatest examples is TLC. TLC went into the studio, they were making all this money. They ended up were on tour, they were broke because
they had to pay like agents and stuff. Is that
they had to pay agents, they had to pay managers, they had to pay part of their deal to their own record company. So, and then they had to split everything three ways because there's three people. And I think at the end of what they've calculated, they had like $500,000, and then like once it got split between three of them, none of them had any money, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, that level of fame and that level of stardom, and to be like not even at the $1 million level, is pretty kind of sad. But I think it's not just about that. It's also like when you sign with any, I'm not an expert in this.
Right.
You'll know more than me, but my suspicion here is that when you sign on the dotted line with these big enterprises, you're giving up so much of your creativity, and you're basically you're becoming, I don't want to say a sellout, because that's such a like loaded word,
right?
But your message, your style, all that stuff now has to be reviewed and approved by somebody other, as opposed to like right now, you do you know.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's part of the thing that I'm afraid of, is the fact that you talk about that is you're handing off your vision, especially when you pour your heart and soul into something. If you pour your heart and soul into something, and all of a sudden I'm having to hand this to somebody, and they're like, you can't do that, you can't do that song, that song's not going to be big, so we're not going to go with that single. That's honestly when people, I remember when TikTok was going away, people were like, so sad that TikTok was going away. That was the one positive I could have seen with TikTok going away, is the fact that it would have given the music industry back control of music, and people wouldn't be making songs for trends, because that's what people do now. And this thing of releasing 2.5-minute songs, and that's supposed to be acceptable, I don't go by that. I make 3, 4, even sometimes 5-minute songs. I don't really care.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I miss the long songs. I long for the days of the like 4-minute and 45-second song of like 20 years ago. Like, I don't know, it's these songs are just way too short now.
And
that's I know why, right? So
yeah, some people may be like, it's honestly only for TikTok. It's because if they make a song 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you could have somebody dance to it for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and that increases your streams. But
Yep.
in that, I almost feel, as someone is, I look at artists and I'm like, don't you want more? Because I feel like you should want more if you're putting your stamp of approval on it. Why would you just take whatever they're giving you? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. 2 minutes, why not?
Yeah, I guess I mean I'm thinking that it probably comes down to the money thing, right? So this is like they're
Right.
seeing that they can make this much more money and get this much more of a fan base. So it's like I guess it's the trade-off of like I'm willing to give up some of my creative control or all of my creative control for X dollars.
Right. And this is where I'm going to tell people to be the wise older person that says this. You don't need more than $100,000 a year. You really don't.
Oh
Like
yeah, I know.
these people who think, oh, you need 2 million, $3 million. Why?
Yeah.
You can't. If you make $3 million a year, unless you want to buy Gucci and Balenciaga and Fendi everything, you can survive on $100,000 a year. Even in this economy, you can survive on
For
$100,000 a
sure.
year.
For sure. Absolutely. And live a pretty damn comfortable life too.
Yeah,
It's like you said, it's all these brand things. It's all the like name brand everything, which you know is absolutely not needed. I mean, it's people, to each their own, right? I'm not going to dictate what somebody spends their money on, but
right.
I'm like if I get to the point where my income, whether it's a combination of things, from OnlyFans, other stuff, like let's say I really make it big over the next few years, and I'm making $500,000, $1 million a year or more. I'm gonna if I'm making $1 million a year, I'm going to be saving. I'm sure there's a tax component, but like taxes aside, if my after tax income was $1 million a year, you better believe that like $900,000 of that is being saved. Probably more than
Right.
$900,000 of that is being saved because that's more like sort of fuel for me to do more of what I want as opposed to just stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even, well, I know, actually, I would love to say that you can't have that kind of life in porn, but you actually, the sad part is now you can. I've
Oh
heard.
yeah. There are guys out there that are making that for sure.
And to that, it's also, I remember somebody saying the fact of, and especially I feel if you're like more of a twink looking person where you have to be that notion of you have to cash in now because eventually you're going to get older and nobody's going to be interested in you. That's
I think that's a story of the past, honestly. Like I don't think that's the case anymore. Because like look at like twinks become twunks who become like zaddies who become daddies these days. And I'm following some of them, right?
right.
I think that what you're saying was true 15 years ago, 20 years ago, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think that like a twink, look at Reno Gold. Reno Gold started as a twink and now he's a twunk and he's
Right.
kind of working his way into zaddy. And then he'll still be, I would imagine, unless he loses interest, but he's good at what he does. He'll still be doing content probably in 10, 20 years and he'll be like in daddy mode at that point.
Well, okay, yes, that'll be. I want to say both are true because yes, you have the point that you're saying, but there's going to be some people always going to be like those people who say, "Oh, over 25 is gross. You're ew." Like over 25, I'm like, first of all, it's like the secret is if you can lie about your age, it don't matter what.
Yeah.
I've been telling people that I'm 25 for like 6 years now, like
There
or
you go.
5 years now.
25 for life.
Yeah, and it's like But the secret is you got to keep it up. You got to maintain yourself. You got to sleep. That's probably the one thing I tell people. You got to sleep. And you got
Absolutely.
to drink water. You got to take care of your skin. That's a lot of. I feel like I would love to say most gays know this. Some gays don't. And then I remember having somebody on here at one point. I'm not going to say who, but 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 I remember them telling me they were 32, and I was thinking, fuck, you're 32. I thought you were like 40. Like and I'm like, and then they said, oh, I'm a raver person. I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense now. Like,
it catches up with you pretty quick, actually. But yeah, I think you're spot on, right? It's like taking care of yourself and eating healthy, right? So it's like not just eating whatever crap. Like, so it's quantity and quality, right? So this is not like you know, it all adds up. Physical activity, right? Like always, even I'm not saying everybody has to go out and sprint marathons and things like, or run marathons or anything like that, but like walk every day and things like, do some physical stuff, and you can look pretty damn good into like your sick, like literally 60s.
yeah, or I would say, and this comes with a lot of sacrifice. It is if you can honestly, if you watch what you eat, you can kind of get away with not doing exercise every day. Like,
Maybe.
and,
Yeah.
well, either that or I just have like not bad genetics. Like, I shouldn't say that. The thing that I have to say is you have to embrace your body as it is, and you have to understand that if you've never been a skinny twig and you naturally have like a bigger build like I do, you're not going
Yep.
to be a skinny twig, and that's fine. You just have to like work at your body as it is now and just try and keep everything down and focus and just watch what you're doing. And if you eat McDonald's 3 meals a day, it's going to be bad for you. But if you're eating it maybe 1 meal a day and you're like pretty much snacking, not snacking all day, but it's like you do like a snack and then just pretty much don't eat a lot during the day, you can get away with that kind of stuff. But that's an extreme sort of lifestyle where I tell people if you're gonna do slim fast shakes like I do, you got to be ready.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think you're spot on though about like knowing your body type, right? Knowing like
Right.
what's your frame, right? Because there are people who like, there are these like twinks, these tiny little skinny twinks. They're never going to be like they're never going to be a muscle daddy. Like they're always going to be this like compact little guy, even as he gets older. And then there are guys that are like, that have the big, huge barrel chest that like, at no point would they ever be a skinny little thing. And they have to kind of work with what you've got, which is, a combination of, I guess it's probably entirely genetics, actually. Like whatever your frame is, it is, and it's going to be whether you're, I don't know, I'm trying to think what would be a big German,
Yeah.
like some big German guy that's like 6'4" and like naturally like a healthy weight for him might be 200 and something pounds, or you could be this like 5'5" little Thai, guy from Thailand, Thai guy with like this tiny little frame. Yeah, you're never gonna. You have to kind of work with what your genetics is and learn how to, max that out to whatever it is that you're sort of cut out to be physically.
Right. And a lot of that I know, especially in the gay community, a lot of people see like people with muscles and all this, and they feel they have to do that. It
Yeah.
depends on. Here's what I would argue. It depends on what line of work you're in. Like, as a drag queen, I use real body. I don't necessarily well, I don't pad at all in this kind of stuff where it's like I can't gain a bunch of muscle because a bunch of muscle would look crazy on me. So I have to kind of keep my body where it's at, to the point that you're saying before. Was like, if you're wanting to get those giant muscles and get big, you have to work at it, and you have to know when to work at it. That's another thing.
Oh yeah.
You have to find your happy medium, and especially when you're starting out, depending on what you're doing, you're gonna have to work out like 6, 7 days a week, and
Oh, for
that's
sure. Yeah, when and it takes time to figure out what will work for you, because even other people with your body type, what works for them might not exactly work for you. So you kind of have to. It's a big ongoing science experiment where you have to kind of figure out. It's good to have some starting points, right? But then got to figure out what works for you, and then keep on tweaking to get the results that you want.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's your dating life been like?
Yeah, it has been a little tougher than I would like to admit. And I think it's because I think of sex in three buckets, right? So I think of sex in there's like a romantic bucket, there's a commerce bucket, if you will, and there's like a recreation bucket. And there can be overlap between them. So think about what a Venn diagram is, right? Where there's the circles.
Right.
So you can have overlap, at least in my. Uh-oh.
Okay. Anyway, we just
I lost you there for a second.
Yeah.
So the recreation bucket, the commerce bucket, and the romance bucket, and there can be some overlap. Like you can. And the example that I gave for the collab with Connor Habib was a great example of where the commerce bucket overlaps with the recreation bucket because we had fun. But I've struggled to meet guys who I click with, personality wise, who are okay with that bucketing, with that sort of Venn diagram. And that's been a recurring struggle for me because I find that there are guys that, even if it's not that they don't necessarily want monogamy, they have maybe had some struggles with me doing the commerce side of things, right? And it's something that I haven't really been able to kind of get a handle on just yet, like how to navigate that. I suppose I could try to just focus on dating guys that are industry guys, but that hasn't really been, a top priority for me.
No, I can understand that. I've heard people say that they almost don't want to date people who aren't in the industry because they won't understand the lifestyle. I totally understand that. It's almost, with me as a musician, I kind of need the same thing. And it's hard because it's like you want a man who's gonna not be jealous if I'm on stage performing and then I make out with two backup dancers, and then at the end, you have to be like, it's a show, and you should be able to accept that. I haven't found that person either.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's you're putting on a show. You're, and it's not to say that you don't enjoy it, because I remember I've had these the debates with guys that I have dated, and they're like, "But it seems like you're having a fun time." I'm like, I am having a good time. But that doesn't mean that I want to have a relationship with this person who I'm doing whatever with. It's like I'm having a good time, but I still am going to go home with you. But it doesn't seem to click with a lot of guys.
Absolutely, because they don't get it because they're on the outside, and you can't explain to someone on the outside what it's like being on the inside, and
totally,
you're never going to be able to. You can try all you want. You can justify it as like, oh, he'll change for me. He's not going to change for you, baby.
Yeah.
No. He's going to do what he wants, and he should that wasn't the person you were meant to be with. I always say the person who you're meant to be with is going to be like, that's fine,
Totally.
whatever. Yeah, I'm not saying that you go out and then sleep with like 100 people after you like get with them, but I'm saying like at the end of the day, they understand it's work, and you can just confirm this, at least from what I know of it. From what I've heard of porn stars, it's not romantic having sex with somebody on camera, especially in a studio sense, when you've got like easily 5 to 10 people watching it.
Well, totally. And it's a start and stop, and it's like, oh no, this angle is not working. This angle's not working. So like maybe it feels good, or maybe it like you think it looks good, or you're getting into it. It's like, no, stop. Let's rearrange. Let's turn him over on his side, and and you'll do these awkward angles and stuff sometimes that but it works well for the camera. And I feel like even if you had a scene with your like romantic partner, so like if I had a romantic partner who was also doing something, I feel like there would not be that romantic energy in most like porn shoots, because you're more concerned about putting on a show and making sure that you get the angles right, and you're always that you're going to contort, you're going to twist to the side, and do these things that you would not do in real life if it's just you together in a bed at night alone. You're going to do what feels good and makes each other feel good. You're not going to like be concerned about like getting the angle right so that the camera and the light hits just the right spot.
Yeah. So, yeah. That, I mean, it's so true. And with that, as I think one of the things I heard somebody say before too is sometimes you just, especially if you're filming a long time, your sex drive goes down because you don't want to have sex, especially when you've been filming sex all day.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because there are times where like having sex just makes me want to have more sex. Like it depends on I actually, this is going to sound funny, I actually think it somewhat depends on the weather, right? Because right now it's like cold and overcast, and I'm disappointed because it was supposed to be like warm and sunny today, and then it turned out to be like the max temperature was like 59 or 60, and it was like overcast and windy. So now I'm like, oh, like I don't like on days like that, I'm like, I don't feel horny at all. So like even if you have sex, it's like as soon as it's over with, like I'm gonna put on my flannel pajamas and
right,
like hunker down and do water my plants or whatever.
Yeah.
But there are times where it's like, especially like it's like 86 degrees and it's like really nice outside and there's like this good vibe where like even if you have sex with like 2 guys or 3 guys, it's like once that's over, it's like, yeah, all right, I'm done. Like, who wants to fuck next?
Right.
I think that like the there are times where energy can actually be built up even more, and I know a lot of what's being put out on on Twitter or X or whatever we call it now is content for the sake of putting on a show. But like, I believe there's some truth to it. There's some of these guys that will do like sex shows, especially like in Europe, they'll do like these on-stage sex shows, like the weekend that they'll have like various awards shows. They'll be like a sex show or like Hustler Ball and these kinds of things. And it's like after that, they'll go to like an after party and have more sex, which is of course all being recorded. But
right.
I think that there's like, you can build up this momentum of like, there's just so much like sexual energy that you just want to keep on going for hours. And I experience that sometimes too. Again, I'm not even saying this as a joke. I think that the weather has so much to do with it, for me at least.
I mean, I can absolutely understand that. It's not. I would love to say it's just sex. It's not just sex. It's doing anything. When it's 20 degrees outside, 18 degrees outside, you don't want to do anything. You want to stay in bed all day. Like,
yeah. But and there's other components too. I mean, I think it's like, it probably like for you, if you, I would imagine like if you had a really amazing performance on a stage and the crowd was amazing and the people that everybody was amazing. Everything, it just like was just like such great energy. Even when it's over and you're home, like hours later, you're probably still, in some cases, if there's that great energy, you're ready to go. So maybe you want to record a video to post somewhere, like, because you've got this
Right.
great energy and it like just builds up.
Absolutely.
And the same kind of thing for sex stuff. It's like you could have this great energy, and I sometimes strip and go dance still. Even these days in San Antonio, I've been go dancing at this bar. There are nights there where it's like it can be like such a clunker of a night, and it's like I just feel drained at the end of it. Or it can be like I feel so energized because everybody was cool. Like the other dancers were cool, and the customers were cool, and it was fun, and the music was good. Where it's like I get home or I whatever, and I'm like, yeah, I'm so full of energy, and like I feel so revved up,
Right.
and I want to go film a jack off scene in the shower now because I'm like, I was just so full of positive energy. But there's also the opposite that happens sometimes, right? So it's like I think that there are just so many different things that come into play. I don't know how this is like a major tangent, but I think that I don't even remember what question we were kind of on, but there's definitely not a one size fits all answer to the like.
No,
how much sex do you want to have after you have sex?
Right, and it's also in some ways going back to people on X, Twitter, whatever. There's some ways for people, and this is going to sound a little bit judgmental, but it's like there's some ways to where you can do it to where it's almost like kind of classy what you're doing, and then in some ways there's just ways of you just look like a thought. And
yeah
I would honestly say those people who like record videos and like it's them being bent over like in a bathroom with their ass out. I'm like, to me that kind of thing, I'm like, I get you, you do you. To me, there's a way, and some people may disagree with this. There's a way to like sit there and film porn and look somewhat like, oh, that person doesn't look trashy doing that. They just look like they're having sex versus like when you're sitting there just like basically saying, look at me, it's almost like it seems kind of trashy.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. I think it's like it's just like it comes down to the energy, right? The energy that the performers have together and sort of what the setting is. It's like it all kind of comes into play to like ultimately land on whether it looks, because I know what you're saying. It's like sometimes you look at something and it's like, not appealing. And then sometimes it's like there is like a classiness to it. And it's not like they're not dressed up in a suit and tie, obviously, but like there's a classiness to it that just, I don't know if it's like how they carry themselves. There's like I don't know if it's confidence or a combination of things, probably.
Yeah, and a lot of it is, I would say there is not, don't get me wrong, not that I don't love tattoos. I do. I love guys with tattoos. But it's like there's something about the amount of tattoos that you have on that I feel like also contributes to that. And it's
the amount and type. I think the type of tattoos matters too.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, come to think of that, I can see where that comes in, but again, there's some people where it's like you do you tat it up like tattoos everywhere looks hot, and sometimes, as you said, if you get the wrong type of tattoos, you look trashy. No.
Yeah. Or it's like sometimes it's like that tattoo on another guy might look hot, but it doesn't look hot on
this person.
Yeah. So it's like you got to kind of, it goes back to the body type thing. It's like you got to kind of know your body type and your features and like figure out like what will work with who you are.
Right. So, what's your relationship to drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, I've never been a drug user. Got plenty of friends who've done drugs, some where it turned problematic, others where it didn't. I do drink, but I don't drink a lot. I drink, people think I'm underestimating, but I don't think I am. I drink maybe 10 drinks a year, and it'll be like my cousin's wedding or something like that. I'll have a glass of wine or a vodka drink or whatever, or some special event, a good friend's birthday kind of thing. I don't like how I feel after I drink. So I kind of scaled back because there was once upon a time when I was like, 21, 22 years old, I would go out several nights a week and consistently drink, consistently have 2 to 3 or 4 drinks, maybe more. And I did not like how I felt. So even though I was always like functional, I always, I never was, I never let it get like to the point where it's like, cause problems in my life. I didn't like how I felt. I didn't like the effects it had on me. So I just several years back now decided I'm like, I am just not going to drink very much. I'm going to drink here and there. Again, I don't think I was ever somebody that I'd call like an alcoholic, but I was just like, okay, I'm going to rein in the drinking and just drink when I really, really truly choose to have a drink. And that's pretty infrequent. And when I do, I enjoy it. Especially I love vodka, so I'll have like a vodka soda.
Right.
But it's a rarity these days.
Honestly, same.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge drinker in terms of drugs. I've never abused anything that wasn't legal, but
Okay.
with that, this is like short story. So I have bone spurs in the heels of both of my feet. And like there was a time before I was on health insurance that I was abusing ibuprofen like crazy. Like I was taking like 18, 24 pills a day. And
Okay.
like that was where I was able to like wean myself off of it and wean myself down, which is honestly, I feel like proof that I can tell people I'm not addicted to something, because if you
Right.
were addicted, you couldn't stop that at all.
You
Like,
wouldn't be
you
able to
need
stop it
help.
yourself. Right.
Yeah. But that's
Did
probably
that did that fuck with your stomach when you were taking that much ibuprofen?
it surprisingly no.
Okay. Good. I am surprised though.
Yeah, I'm probably down the line. It's not going to be good for me, but it was just that's one of the problems. Again, hate you, America. The fact that at the time I was when I finally had to get it, I was paying like $100 something a month for health insurance. So I'm like, I can't afford this.
Yeah.
Like most people can't afford to spend like $150, $160 a month on just health insurance. It's almost insane when you like rack that up on top of other bills.
And then you still got to pay deductibles and things like that when you have to see a doctor. It's not like it's just pay the $160 and all of a sudden everything's included.
If you're lucky enough, like medicine and everything like that's covered, but sometimes it's not. And in that, I got better, and then I just learned how to take care of myself, because there was a thing in that. Once I finally did get on pills, I was still mixing stuff, which is I was taking the anti-inflammatory and taking ibuprofen on top of that, and it's just eventually I ended up finding out that not working on my feet anymore stopped it. So that's a lesson, children. Don't abuse drugs, no matter illegal or legal. And if you do, just know that you're going to need to find help at some point to stop if you don't have willpower.
Yeah, that's a really good learning that everybody needs to hear that message, I think.
Yeah. So, here we are. What are your thoughts on how the LGBT community is being treated today?
Yeah, we kind of touched on this a little bit even before we were talking about politics. But
yeah,
I think that what we've been through over the past several decades, really sort of post Stonewall, right, is like there's this 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And I think that we're in a 2 steps back mode right now. And I get annoyed sometimes when I hear people say that, like, oh, well, what's next? We're going back to like the McCarthy era, and and I'm like, no, we're not, right? Do I agree that like some of the things that are related to like some of the legislation for trans and stuff like that, it's like, are those problematic? Yes. But do I think that there's going to be this like slippery slope where all of a sudden all LGBT people like have all their rights stripped away, and I see all these memes, and it's like they're coming for you now. And I'm like, I don't think realistically that they are, but I do think that we need to be a little bit more united. And I've noticed, particularly in the past couple of years, that like there's less unity within the LGBTIAQ. There's a lot of extra letters now,
right?
To be fully inclusive. But I feel like there's more maybe discord now than there used to be. And I've heard gay guys say things like, oh well, it's all these trans people that do this, or it's like the lesbian community. I've heard a few people who I know voice concerns that like, well, the problem is men. And I'm like, oh my God, like, well, let's not be divisive, because we talked about divisiveness in politics and in like the country overall. Let's not be divisive within the LGBTQIA plus community. Now let's try to be like, even if we don't agree on everything and we have different priorities, let's absolutely not bash each other or be combative or create these like environments where there's disdain for some other letter within the group. I'm like, that's not going to do anybody any good. So I think it's like there's two things. Like, don't worry that like all of a sudden there's going to be this like massive stripping away of everybody's rights. But that's not to say just sit on our laurels. We need to be a little bit more united and have like, common support for each other. So if you're a lesbian or you're bisexual or you're a gay guy or whatever it might be, like be supportive of trans people when and how you can. Like, or if you're, like let's kind of like have some more unity. So don't worry as much, but do have more unity. And even if somebody is the same letter as you, try to like whether it's at work or your neighborhood or out, like whatever it is, try to like, what's the phrase, the olive branch or whatever, like try to like have some bonds and have some relationship with people that are beyond your letter.
Absolutely. And it's also the fact that things are going to happen here. Unfortunately, Trump's making that very clear. Things are going to happen here. But we do need to stick together, because we have to think as the LGBTQ community that the fact is, even if things are still done here, we got to look towards the Middle East.
That's true too. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got motherfuckers dying because of the fact that they just come out of the closet, and that's supposed to be fine. And
that's a good point.
Yeah. All these people saying it's not our fight. First of all, when people want to point out, going back to Stonewall, if it wasn't for a trans woman named Marsha P. Johnson, gay people wouldn't be able to have the stepping stone for the rights that we have today. So you have to ask yourself, why are you trying to fight for something that essentially will help you? And at the end of the day, when people look at stuff, it's like, especially drag queens, it's like, hello, a lot of trans people are like the backbone of the drag queen community.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
With all of this, it's like all of us need our help. Now, going back to the whole trans people being in sports, this is the one thing that I can say. Yes, I understand you want to fight for that. I get that. But that's also capitalism. That's private companies you're talking about. That's not something to where I get you want the government to be involved, but that's private industry. Private industry runs the way that they're going to run, and we can't necessarily fight that when we're sitting here trying to avoid having people die on the streets.
Yeah, no, I think that you're spot on. And I think that let's go back to the business controls everything, right? So this is a matter of like influence what you can. And I think that it's like, even for people out there that are like part of the LGBT community, I encourage more people to go into like business and try to have an influence, try to get a job at whatever, Nike or, whatever, like, I don't know why that was like the random company, but like try to
Right.
get a job at whatever big company, you work your way up to have more like LGBTQIA plus leadership in these companies that can then influence things and be more vocal about things and, spending money. I think that like at some point there will be like this corporate vision. And I think we were starting to get there, but again, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Where
Right.
like, I think corporations will realize like this is a community that we can't alienate. So let's make sure that we do right by them.
And in that, I love when people say they're gonna stop supporting certain businesses because they don't support queer people. I get that fight. I've been in that fight myself. But again, you have to think at some point they're corporations. A
Yeah.
lot of times they're going to be doing stuff no matter what. I mean, if you want to stop Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A is perfectly fine. It's literally run as a company. It's a religious organization. They're closed on Sundays. You want to stop supporting Chick-fil-A, I'm all for that. When you start breaking it down to other businesses, you get to the point of, okay, so where am I supposed to go? Like,
yeah. No, I agreed 100%. I saw somebody recently. I think it's Target is going to no longer do some survey of like, best LGBT places to work, and Target's no longer going to do this annual survey. And it's like, let's boycott Target. And I'm like, okay, they're like them choosing to not do this survey anymore is a business decision. They probably looked at that and they're like, hey, us doing this survey costs us a lot of money. It costs us time. It costs us having to coordinate and have an HR person spend all this time. And it's like, well, we don't really get that much out of it. They're not going. Target is by no means saying like, we hate queer people. Like Target's not saying that. Target is not saying that. They're just saying like, we're not going to do this survey anymore, but we're still committed to, inclusion and everything. But like, I don't know. So it's like, I'm not going to boycott Target or these other companies. They're making business decisions that aren't,
right.
They're not hate-driven business decisions. They're business decisions that are basically trying to, again, I don't work for Target, so I don't know for sure, but like being a person who has a business background academically and work experience, they're making decisions to optimize their profits. And these are not decisions. Again, Chick-fil-A is the opposite, right? Chick-fil-A, like you said, is associated with these religious people that are, kind of extreme. But Target is not. Target is a publicly traded company that is making decisions to maximize their profit, and they recognize that like this particular thing, doing this survey, to be on some, I don't know if it's the who puts out the survey or whatever, but like that's not going to like serve their interests as well, so they're not going to do it anymore. That's like when people say boycott Target, I like want to fall off my chair.
And also, you have to think with that, especially when you're in a smaller town, a smaller suburb, and you're just trying to get out. When you're a queer person, if you say, okay, we're going to stick together and we're going to ban Target, Target might be the only place that they have to go.
Yeah.
Or it's like ban Walmart. Walmart might be the only place that's near them.
In small town America, for sure. Walmart is like, yeah.
So at the end of the day, you want to ask yourself, yes, you obviously want to be active. You want to support stuff. You want to sign legislation. You want to sign petitions, all this stuff. I understand it. But at some point, you have to use common sense. I guess it's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, totally. And think about, I guess there's a word I like, it's myopic, right? So don't have a myopic view either, right? So think about, to your point around like, if that's the only store in town, if Walmart is the only store in town in a small town somewhere an hour outside of Jacksonville, Florida, because I'm sure there are towns where that's the case. There's literally just a Walmart and that's all they have. So there are probably LGBT people that work at that Walmart. There are probably LGBT people that shop at that Walmart. There are probably like, poor Hispanic single mothers that work there, that shop there. It's like if you're like, hey, we got the Walmart to close. It's like, great job. Now there's no fucking place for people to work or shop in this
Right.
town. But you sure proved your point that like you're mad that they didn't fill out this survey to, you know, I don't know. I just get
Yeah.
so irritated by any kind of myopic thinking.
And it's also that would go to at a point where you talk about this. It's you can look at the fact that unless you're working as a person for a small time business or you're an independent contractor and you work for yourself, you're probably working for somebody who does terrible things, that makes terrible decisions, that does all of this. It's like, and at some point, when people talk about the one thing that I will get again, this is from answering phones. We're gonna answer the last question. When I deny people their chance to like get extra money as like a customer rewards cash and stuff, and I work for a car company, and they're like, "Oh, but when this is all done, they're gonna go to Hyundai." I'm gonna be like, "So what? I'm working for this company. I'm not loyal to this company.
Yeah.
I'll leave whenever I want."
Yeah.
It's like if that person goes, that's not a big deal to me. As long as I still have a paycheck, I don't give a fuck what they do with their money.
For sure.
Like,
for sure. Yeah.
I know.
It's all about the big picture. It's all about the big picture and not just about one singular thing.
Yes. And where am I? Oh, final question. What's the biggest misconception about you?
I think that the biggest misconception of me, we were DMing about this being a tough question,
Right.
is that I'm probably somebody who's pretty hard to put in a peg, right? So people like understanding somebody and being able to like classify them, put them in their place on a shelf. And I would make the statement that I am not somebody who can just be put in a peg or put in a place on a shelf, because I have such a probably strange combination of interests and sort of background elements and all that stuff. So like, we talked a few minutes ago about like, nobody needs more than $100,000
Right.
to live on. I actually diligently track like every dollar that I spend. I did this years ago and then I kind of fell away from it. But for 2024, I tracked diligently every dollar that I spent, and I spend like $35,000 a year. Like it was like 35,400 something that I spent in 2024. And this is not, I'm not living some like crazy lifestyle where I'm like, sleeping in my car. I bought a house. I live in a house that it's like I do normal things, but I watch my money. So I'm super frugal because I'm all about like making value oriented decisions, buying things that like provide the best value. As you know, and as why I'm your guest tonight,
Yeah.
is like I'm into the adult entertainment world. I also have a corporate background. I have a corporate job. I'm super into real estate and investing and these kinds of things. I love cats. Like I've got all these like strange combination of it. Like I'll go for a walk around my neighborhood. I stop and talk to like the neighborhood cats, and people probably think like, who is this like cat guy that's like stopping and petting the cat? They all come up to me and they purr. So like I'm just so all over the place that people can't put me in any kind of like slot. It's like here's this guy who works in business and has an MBA, but he only spends $35,000 a year, and he's super into cats and he does porn. So I think that I'm somebody that just can't be really easily put in a peg. And I think that people don't know how to deal with me sometimes. So That's my answer to that question. I've been thinking about it for all day.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm going to answer this question, but that's understandable. I think one of the things, and I had to check a friend on this at one point, where they said they were like talking with this person, and the person they were talking to was in like OnlyFans and porn, and they were shocked that they were smart. I'm like, do you think that all people who do adult content are just fucking stupid? Like, do you think that they're just a fucking dumbass? And it's like, no. With that, it's almost to where it's like, yes, I understand you not thinking till you find out that's somebody's background or the fact that you have an MBA, thinking that they're a rocket scientist. Like, I understand that, but you don't have to think that they're fucking stupid.
Right.
It's a happy medium. Just because they enjoy having sex doesn't mean that they're dumb.
Yeah. No, totally.
I mean, some people do point out the fact that it's true. Max Lord, but it's like, or there's some people, and sometimes your insinuations about people are 1000% right. When somebody says, I remember seeing an interview where somebody said that this was a gay person, that they were in prison, and they stayed in prison longer because the sex was that good. And I'm thinking, I'm like, you sound fucking stupid saying that. You sound like an idiot.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a pre-recorded interview. Why on earth would you let somebody put that out there? But they think that's fine. And I'm saying that because I'm trying to get this person on my podcast, and I'm going to say to them, I'm like, are you dumb? Like legit, are you dumb? Like, to say that? But
I hope you get that person, because I would love to hear how they navigate
that. I know. I'm trying. But with that, it's almost like, and this I also, I guess, can go in a part of my the misconceptions about me, which people think I'm shady and intimidating, which with that, I understand the intimidating thing. I'm very tall. Well, I shouldn't say I'm very tall. I'm tall. I'm 6'3".
Okay, so that's very tall. That actually is probably like 95th percentile, right?
Yeah. So it's like, the intimidating thing I get is also have a conversation with me. I love talking to people for the most part. Some days I don't want to talk to people. This is my thing. Usually when I don't want to talk to people, I'm going to be at home, because I'm not one of those people who thinks I'm going to go to the club and I'm going to get in a better mood. You have to be in a good mood before you go out somewhere.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you get to the club and you're not in a good mood, it's going to repel people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in terms of the shady part, I always say, I run my, well, this is my thing. I run my mouth. And it's like, when people are shocked, they're like, that's shady. I'm like, no, I just told you what I actually thought. I didn't lie to you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's shadier to lie to you. If it's, especially when you see somebody where they're not doing their fullest potential. Again, my friend Spunk the Swink, I've watched some of his stuff. I watched some of his videos, and I told him, I'm like, I love you. Most of the time you hit the mark. You didn't do it this time.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Even as a musician, when people say that, even I'm harder on myself than anything. When I hear myself hit notes sometimes as a singer, and I'm like, I couldn't hit it that day. And it's just like, it happens. Especially the thing that you say about the physical thing, it's very true in that endurance. It's honestly why I sometimes I go on Twitch and I'll sing for like an hour and a half. It's like straight. And when people are like, how do you do that? You have to train your body how to do that. But sometimes at an hour and a half, depending on if you have eaten or if you haven't eaten, you're going to be tired after that. And it's okay to crash. I actually think it's healthy when people tell me the truth. Now, is it sometimes hard to hear? Yeah, and you want to take it in, but eventually deep down you kind of know that, especially when someone who loves you is telling you something that's wrong, you know it's coming out of a place of them wanting to see you get better and not necessarily want to see you down in like the trenches. So,
yeah. That totally makes sense. I mean, it's funny that that's something that some people might find off-putting, because to me, the opposite would be off-putting. To me, the thing that would be off-putting is the person who just tells you everything you did was great. Da, 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 da. It's like, no, if you're my friend, I want you to tell me if I look like a fool doing XYZ so that I can change it. Because how else am I going to grow or change? Whether that's something related to porn or doing drag or whatever it might be.
Right.
To me, that the things that maybe some people perceive about you, that actually to me makes you a more authentic person and a better friend to those people who you're actually friends with, because you're going to be real with them.
Yeah. But there's also, as I always say to people, there's a difference between like your friends and trolls. That's what I tell people.
Sure.
You do not this if you're gonna go online, just especially as I say, if you're a drag performer, just expect that there's going to be trolls when you're live streaming. It's honestly it's going to happen, and people are going to try and shut you down, and they're going to try and they're going to succeed sometimes. Literally, as I was doing TikTok right after they lifted the ban, I went live for the first time. Somebody reported my live as I was in it. I don't even know what I did. They reported it for some like bullshit, like sexual violence and gender exploitation bullshit.
Jeez.
And I couldn't go live for a week. So I'm like, now I'm just gonna sit at home and do nothing. So
Yeah, you have to just trudge on, I guess, right?
yeah, that's all we all have to do.
Yeah.
And that's honestly, you gotta drudge on through the day and honestly not be afraid to be weak. That's something where I would say just like end on this. I feel like a lot of people, especially the older gays you are, have a fear of being weak and letting people see them at their low points because of the toxic masculinity that they were brought up in. And the thing that I should tell people with that is let people see it.
Hmm.
They want to see it, they want to grow from it, they want you to grow from it. Anyone who wants to like bash you over the head with a metaphorical mallet when you're down isn't your friend.
Yeah. Yeah. That's facts. That's a really good point, because it's like there's one thing about being real with somebody and giving them that useful feedback, but you can do so with care, right? And tell them like, hey, I love you. Here's what you did that was good, but here's what you did that could be improved. And there's a difference between that and like just getting mashed with a mallet.
Yes, absolutely, totally. All right. And with that being said, it was a pleasure getting to meet you.
Absolutely. Likewise.
Okay.
This has been a great experience.
Thank you. And with that being said, this is Gay Out the City. I'm your host, Prince Electro Diamond, and I hope you enjoy.